Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi friends, welcome to my September wrap up, and the day you're watching this should be October 1st, so happy October. Can't believe that's time already. September went by in the blink of an eye, but it was just so wonderful. I rounded out the month. Just yesterday I got back from a weekend with my family celebrating my grandpa's 80th birthday. I got my plaid out. I got this cool plaid jacket and I'm vibing with it. I'm feeling the fall here for sure. But yeah, I had a wonderful time with my family. The weather's still been pretty nice, but we are finally going to tiptoe into some fall weather, which I am pretty happy about, okay? Because it has been pretty hot and I'm ready for it to cool down a little bit. I sure am. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. If you are new here, welcome. So happy you've made it to the Book Refuge. I do my monthly wrap-ups possibly a little bit differently than some people you might have seen. The reason being I read way too many books, as you're about to see. Well, not too many for me, just the right amount for me. And it would be too much if I spoke about every single book that I've read this month. So what I do is I do weekly wrap-ups, usually between 8 to 15 books, depending on, and you can check out that playlist right here to see every single book that I read this month. You'll be able to get more info on them, because I do speak pretty in depth about the books that I read to give people a good idea if they want to read it or not. And also, wow, that was just a weird noise right outside my window. And also, I like to just gush about my favorites at the end of the month. So I have my 5 favorite books that I read, and that's what we're going to get into today once we go through my stats really quick. Stats, everyone still seems to really like those, so I do mention them quickly at the beginning. Me talking about my stats is not to rub it in anybody's face or to show that I'm better than anybody by how much that I read. There are people who read more than me, believe it or not, and there are people who read significantly less, and that they're happy with that, and I'm happy for them. As long as you're reading something, I'm happy with it. Okay, whether you read 1 book in a month or you read 41, as the case is for me. So yes, I read 41 books in September, and that was 15,326 pages. Now, I don't say this too often, but I actually more only because of the Readathon that I was a part of, and we get points for how many books that we read and pages and stuff like that. But normally 41, that's an absolute solid amount. You know, that's more than 1 book a day. That makes me feel awesome. My averages each month, that's about exactly right. Last month I read 40, July I read 45, that's good. So I feel great about it. And the formats that I read them in is I read 9 ebooks, 13 physical books, 10 audiobooks, and 24 ARCs. Now, ARCs does include whatever type that they were, so the numbers don't exactly equal 41 because let's say it's an ALC, right? It's an audiobook ARC. I count it for both of those, just so you know. That's why those numbers are a little bit off. The subgenres of these books were, I had 18 contemporary, 4 dark romance, 2 dystopian, 3 erotic romance, 4 fantasy, 5 historical, 2 sci-fi, 2 suspense, and 1 that is other. And we'll get to what that other one is in just a moment because it actually was one of my favorites, which was great. And then the ratings for these books, I had 1 DNF, 1 2-star, 2 3 stars, 4 3.5 stars, 15 4 stars, 8 4.5 stars, 9 5 stars, and 1 6-star, which is a new to me 6-star this time around. So that's great. We're going to get to that. But anyway, now, as I said, we're going to get into what my favorite books this month were, and we'll gush a little bit about those, okay? But before I do, why don't you guess what you think what my favorite book of the month was? Just pause right here and go ahead. It's one you probably heard me gush about a lot recently. So why don't you go ahead and guess that, and I'll tell you when we get to that one. But a 5-star read that I loved, this one was my other that I read, and this was Jade City by Fonda Lee. So this is a fantasy romance, and I read this, actually Buddy read this book with Jenn from Jenn Reads Romance, or Smart Women Read Romance, and this was at the suggestion of Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Live. Hi Crystal, hi big sis. She is my bookish big sis on the internet, and I adore her. And so earlier this year, she was a bit more heavily into fantasy than normal, which she's always into fantasy, you know, but she was just really feeling it. And she read this series, which honestly, we both have heard a lot of good things about. For me, it's been a while since I've seen this one floating around, but it is also like immediately recognizable to me. And when I mentioned I was interested in it, Jenn was like, let's buddy read it. So we buddy read it, and I will be continuing with this series. Actually, if you saw my October TBR, you will have seen that Jade War is already on it. But this, it is very like difficult to explain this book is the thing. What I had heard said about it is kind of what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say this is like a fantasy version of the mafia, where the currency, instead of being money, which I mean, money is still important, it is jade, a magical jade. And it has the ability to enhance people's strength and give them powers, and they're able to do special things with it. And there is this small island called Kekon, and there are these different factions or clans within here, and that's where I say that it's a bit of magical mafia, because each of these clans is kind of set up like a mafia would, right? You have a Don at the top, you have his enforcer, you have his you know, like his consigliere, you have the person who is the money man and who is the, you know, advisor. Like all of those roles exist. They all have different names within this world that I won't go into in this. But this family we get introduced to is the Call family. And there's 4 siblings, 1 adopted, 3 born, and currently the oldest brother is the head of this family. Now, he has been a peacetime leader, we would say, right? They're, for the most part, we're at peace with all of these clans. They each have their territories. They're happy with what they get. And then one of the other, again, we're calling them like Dons. They have a different name in here, but I know that a lot of my viewers are mafia readers, so we're speaking in those terms, even though it's not exact comparison. I'm just... that's how my brain works for it, right? And one of these leaders of a clan wants to make some moves, and that's going to put the Call family in a very different position. So there are also, you know, different types of people too, because like the real world still kind of exists too. You know, like there's, I don't want to say because they're all humans, but non like magical people, like people who can't use the jade to do things, they still have their whole life going on. There's still like tourism that happens in the city, and there's deals made with politicians by the mafia dons to make sure everything works well together. And so when the wars start between these clans, there is a lot of fallout for the people around them. So there's a lot of pressure to keep their shit under wraps, right? So yeah, that is, you get introduced to all of these siblings. You start finding out what their roles are. You know, as I said, one of them's the head. One of them is his enforcer type. And then there is the sister in the family. Her name is Shay, and she's actually been off the island for many years. She went to school. She doesn't plan to use her jade anymore. She's really like put that behind her. But now she's back in the city. She's trying to start a life again where she doesn't use jade. But even, you know, you as the reader know, like, how long could that last? Because it's still known who your family is. And if you're not using jade, then you're just a weakness to the rest of your family. Like, I'm just saying, I could see that with my eyes, and I wasn't totally wrong. And then there is a youngest brother, who this would be the adopted one. First, it was the mailman, which, again, happy to get my out. Second, it was the kid next door who doesn't understand that the buzzers all ring in everyone's house. She literally hit everyone's buzzer. Anyway, okay, so then we have the youngest brother, who that is kind of the adopted one. He's adopted into this family because his parents have both died in different ways, and I believe he is like a cousin to them, or I'm not quite sure. I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe he's a cousin, but he's adopted as a sibling. Like, they call him a little brother. They love him that way. And he's actually at the university to learn how to use jade and how to become a powerful, like, wielder and all that stuff. So it's very interesting because it definitely has, like, urban fantasy vibes. That's more what I would call it, because there's still parts of the real world that exist. There's technologies, but then there are these people who can use the jade, and they're called green bones is what they're called. And basically you wear the jade, and the more power you have, the more you have. Some people are able to contain lots and lots of jade. Some people, they have a maximum that they'll reach, and if they get too much, there can be consequences for that and everything. So that's enough explanation, probably just enough to confuse you. But let me say why this was compelling is I don't read a ton of straight fantasy. You guys know this. That sounded weird. It doesn't have to be straight sexually, but I mean, without a heavy romance plot, right? I like romantasy. This does not have that. Yes, there are relationships in here, but they are very second and even tertiary to what's going on, right? But somehow this author immediately makes me feel connected with a lot of the characters, and even the ones who I didn't like at the beginning, I wanted to figure them out. I wanted to understand why they were behaving in certain ways, and some of those characters were my favorite then by the end. So there was a lot of pain in this one. This one didn't hurt quite as bad as I think it will in the future. I have seen many videos and things of people absolutely weeping over this series, so I think I got off easy with this one. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was a 5-star read. Like I said, not much for romance at all. There are a few sex scenes that exist in this, but it's not, the storyline's not romance. So it's a fantasy with some sex scenes. Let's say that, not with romance. But I deeply, deeply care about these siblings by the end of this book. And as soon as I get my next Audible credit on the, I think it's the 3rd of October, I'll be getting Jade War because I want to continue with this series so badly. So yeah, I know that's not my normal content. Most of you might not even care, but if you're someone who does like the crossover or you're willing to read that, just know I mean it when I say this is like a 0 for the romance part, but the characters were all just so good. And yes, there was a lot of confusing bits about it. You know, it's a whole new terminology and all those things. But like I said, in my head, I was structuring it as a mafia story. Now, I know not everyone's going to do that because maybe they're not as well versed in mafia or they don't care to make those comparisons. But to me, for what I know about like mafia structure and how those worlds work and all that stuff, it was very clear to me to like see where everybody hit. And that made it a very enjoyable experience for me because when there was moves being made, I could see it would be like, oh, this is like the Italians going after the, what, you know, that's how it was to me. So yeah, 5-star for that one. Okay, next we had Born for Silk by Nikki Harris. So this is another one that's extremely difficult to explain it. But this one is dystopian. Sorry, I'm actually getting warm because I'm being a little bit too expressive, so I'll strip that down. This one is a dystopian. It has a bit of the Handmaid's Tale vibes. It has a altered human who's like superhuman, extra strong, extra powerful type of guy. And there are these women who, they are the ones who are able to have children. They have the best bloodlines. They have the best chance of becoming pregnant and keeping the baby, because these altered humans, like we're talking, our hero in this is over 10 feet tall. Not all human women are able to breed with a man that size, let's just say, and not only, you know, get the stuff in to do his job, but to be able to birth a child like that, right? You know, if we want to get down to the brass tacks of it, you know, it's like when there is intermingling of certain like species within something, you know, like they have to be compatible with each other, and not everyone are. So the women who are called the Silk Girls. And again, they are a bit like, you know, the Handmaid or something like that. Although I will say for these ladies, it's maybe dressed up a little bit nicer sounding, right? But it's still very much as them being indoctrinated that you're doing a service for your world. And our girl in this one, I did write it down. Hold on here. Aster. She, along with some other women, are chosen to be a part of the group that will be bred by the king and his men. And the way that they want to do it here to keep babies safe is that it's a blind situation is how it goes, is that the women literally wear a veil when they're in bed. And so whichever man is coming to their room and impregnating them, they don't know who it is. So that when they get pregnant, hopefully all the women will like be pregnant at the same time. very few people actually know which woman is impregnated by the king. So it was very interesting because that seems like totally wackadoodle. Of course it is. It's dystopian. The things people get up to in those is wild shit, right? But it actually is a very clever idea if you're someone who there are people trying to assassinate you, because there definitely are. There are people who evolved and who like work with the system. There are people who don't and who, you know, want to have and keep their own babies for themselves, but then they struggle to feed themselves. There are people who let themselves become evil and are cannibal. There are cannibals in here. It is terrifying. So it is a lot of danger. And so our king, he catches a glimpse of Aster and he really wants her. And so he begins very quickly breaking a lot of protocols for her. And to me, there was some aspect of fated mate that was going on in here. But he basically breaks that pretense of like, it's supposed to be kept a secret and everything, because he finds a girl that he wants and he wants her to know that he wants her. But anyway, before we get to that stuff, the setup of how that works is actually very clever in my opinion, because all of the women, they want them to be breeding healthy, you know, hybrid kids basically, but also one of them would be the next king, and they wouldn't know who. So that means none of the women can be jealous of each other either, because they don't know which one of them is holding the heir. And when your child is born, you know, it gets taken away and basically put in a nursery where there's other women who take care of the baby. So it's that type of thing of like dehumanizing you, dehumanizing the birth of babies and things like that. But then what happens when love, which is, you know, it's not straight up like forbidden to have it. It's just, you know, not something people talk about or that they're aiming for. But what happens when love gets interjected into this, and now, you know, you don't want to share your people with anyone. So yeah, it was definitely a very intense story. What I will say, well, I've already said a lot. I love this. It was a 5-star read for me. This was a big risk for Nikki Harris to take, right? She writes mafia romance. She writes dark romance, which, I mean, this is still dark, but it is a very different, like it's a very different setup than her other stuff for sure. But I thought it was very powerfully done. And this one has an HEA by the end of it for the king. Now I forgot his name. What's his name? Rome and Aster. But there will be 2 more books in the series. So we're going to follow some other ladies and their men as well. So you do get an HEA for them. I thought this was going to have a cliffhanger. This one was going to have a cliffhanger, so I was really worried. But no, there's more that the world has to go through to heal a little bit. But also this couple has an HEA. So I talked all over the place with that. Hopefully some of it made sense. All right, now we get to the 3rd book. And did you guess it? Did you figure it out? You probably did. My favorite book of the month, a new 6-star read to add, was Sovereign by Rhea Morris Edwards. And I know I've said this multiple times now. I've talked about this book in 3 or 4 videos already that's been out, but that's what happens when I find a new favorite. I talk about it until it is beaten into your head and you know that you need to pick it up as well. So I have links to all my favorites down below, so definitely go snag one there. But this was a completely new to me author. I had never heard of her before. I never seen her stuff come across me. It hadn't been put in any of my viewer recommendation forms or anything. But I guess this book came out back in January or February, maybe. I don't know. It's been out. Maybe it was April. I don't even know. But point being, it's been out the whole summer. And it was just by chance, right? You know, I do look on Instagram for recommendations now and then. And there was a post that had 25 different dark romances that someone had read. And there was 2 on there that I had no idea what they were at all. And this one, I saw the cover that just had the bullhorns, which I do actually have both covers because my lovely viewers each sent me a copy of it, which is amazing. But I just saw the like bullhorns on the front of it and I was like, what is this? It's a dark cowboy romance, huh? And so I looked it up and I broke from my TBR for a hot minute because my reading is always so structured every month based on arcs and things I have to get. And I was just feeling like I wanted to break free a little bit. So I picked up Sovereign and I absolutely devoured it. It was difficult to put it down. And I mean, that happens multiple times a month. It's not like it's completely a foreign feeling to me. It does happen a good bit. But this one just had so many of my like favorite things. And being able to just devour it in this story was epic. So this is a dark cowboy romance. It is BDSM, and not BDSM light. The whole romance is based around BDSM. So if you're not interested, just tack that off to the side already. This is an erotic romance, and it's a 5 on the chili pepper scale. Okay, so we're very sex forward. It's very lust forward, but it's my favorite type of that because it's BDSM as healing. It's BDSM as like the first connection, and then the love coming after as the trust forms, because BDSM takes a fair bit of trust to be able to get that started, you know? And so, yeah, I love to see it happen, right? And with this one, we have our lovely heroine. Her name is Kira. And in the beginning, she is in this kind of shitty situation. She is a wife to a rancher named, what's his first name? I don't know, but Garrison is his name. And she's been married to him since she was 18. I think she's 22 now. And he basically married her for her land. And he doesn't physically abuse her. Like, he's not smacking her around or starving her or whatever. But he also doesn't try to be gentle with her, say nice things to her. He orders her around. She cooks his meals. She's there in his bed. She's just an object to him. And not even that convenient to him at times either. He doesn't care about her at all. And then we have Gerard Sovereign, who is the biggest landowner in the area. He has the biggest ranch in the area. You know, he's a millionaire, billionaire rancher, which I always think is a little funny that they're able to get up there. But he is a next door neighbor, and he's also an enemy of the Garrisons. There is a bloody, long, horrible history between them. But in the beginning of the story, Gerard is at the Garrison house. He gets a glimpse of Kira, discovers that this is Garrison's lovely wife, who he can just tell she has an air of submissiveness around her, and he's very drawn into that because BDSM is his favorite way to do it. And he also, it would be a cherry on top to take something that belonged to Garrison, right? So yeah, that's the setup of this. He gets a good look at her. He sees that it's not a great situation. He wouldn't necessarily be taking her away from someone who cared about her too much. And then he goes home. And we don't hear anything from him, which, I mean, it's the next chapter, but in the story, it's several months later. Oh, no, wait, I missed a part. I missed a part before, several months later. The next day, her husband goes out with Sovereign to do some scouting. They're working the cattle, and her husband is killed on this. That's what happened. She finds out her husband is dead and that she was left all of his property and money and his debts, by the way, as well. Garrison has 2 brothers, though, who are not happy about this, and they blame her somehow for it being her fault. But then we skip ahead a few months. So this is where we skip ahead a few months, and now Gerard makes his move, and he invites her over for dinner, and he explains to her that he had bought up most of her husband's debt, and he owns pretty much everything she has. So here, this woman thought she was free. She hasn't been financially independent or on her own ever in her life, and now she has a chance to be free, and her husband was in debt to Sovereign, and so he makes her a deal. If she would be his submissive for a year, he would erase her debt. And at first, she's very resistant to this, but he's able to convince her that this isn't going to be horrible for you. This is going to be a great thing for you to get through. And we go from there. So yes, this very quickly, we're getting into the sex, the BDSM in this, but there was so many like beautiful moments. It's my favorite type of healing that happens both for her and for him. You know, we learn why he hates the Garrisons, the life that he's had. We meet the men in his life that are his like found family, and there will be more books in the series about them. So like the next one is going to be about Weston, which that book is already out. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. It just came out the other day. And I can't wait to read it because I love dark cowboys and I love BDSM and I was here for it. So this was a 6-star read for me, okay? It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I've already had some people be disappointed in it because I'm gushing about it. And I'm like, y'all know I have very certain taste in things. And sometimes that taste is good for all. And sometimes there's the things that are just specifically Jenn's shit. And Sovereign is specifically Jenn's shit. Okay, so 2 other new releases to put on here. So we have The Wraith King by Juliet Cross. Very excited for this one. It's been highly anticipated. This book was supposed to be out in January, and Juliet had to push it back because there were some changes she needed to make based on some beta reader feedback. And she knew if she pushed it out, she would be disappointed and wouldn't be the best that she could do. And it isn't because it took her 9 months to rewrite it. It's because she has other obligations now, right? She's committed with publishers. She had other books that had to get put out. So Wraith King had to get pushed. And I'm so glad she decided to do that, because this story, which is about Una and Gaul, this is a like light fae and a dark fae coming together for a marriage alliance against a like greater evil type thing. There's dragons, there is fated mate, there's a prophecy, there's magic, there's all these things included. But at the heart of it, this was a romance, and it was an arranged marriage that needs a public consummation in certain aspects. So definitely had some Ruby Dixon vibes, for sure was in here if you've read her books in her Bride series that she has. And I was smiling the whole time, okay? I strongly and clearly out my bias, of course. Juliet Cross is a friend and one of my favorite authors, so you are more than welcome to take it with a grain of salt how much I love this. But you know, it wasn't a 6-star read. There's some things in it that like aren't perfect, but this reminds me a lot of, you guys know how crazy I went about Embers in the Snow a couple months back, and just how that one just had the things that specifically make it very readable and exciting for me. And to me, that's what Wraith King also had, right? It has so many of those moments that you want, right? There's a revenge killing, there's a don't touch my wife, there's a dragon, there is, you know, magical sex happening sometimes. Like, it just has all those things. And again, Juliet is a dear close friend, so just take it for what you will. But I loved it, and I would tell you if I didn't like it, because I have a track record. I've proved that I would, but I don't have anything to critique, so I'm not going to pretend to be, you know, judicial about it. I loved it. It was great. And the last one I wanted to talk about, I'm so happy, because I'll tell you with this one, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a 5-star, and I was nervous, okay? And that was The Finest Print by Erin Langston. So again, another highly anticipated book. Last year, Forever Your Rogue was in, I think it made it in my top 3 or 5. I can't remember right this second, but very high up. And this is her, you know, she has had a novella come out since then, but this is basically her follow-up book, okay? So she doesn't have like a series title for this. It is connected. Absolutely. I'll tell you how in a second. But I was very much anticipating this book, and man, she didn't let me down. She didn't let me down. I'll get into the things that this one wasn't quite a 6-star for me. It is for a lot of people, and it should. It absolutely should. I'll just tell you why for me. But this is connected. So this is Gavin, and I can't remember the woman's name, but this is Gavin's daughter, okay? So Gavin is the hero from Some Winter's Evening, and Gavin is the sister of, I forgot her name too, Nate and, damn it, how did I just forget her name? Click. Cora. Got it. Woo! Nate and Cora. This is Cora's brother, Gavin, okay? The one that's a lawyer in that one and everything. And he has a little like one-night tryst that leads to his heroine. So we are, I believe it's like 22 years later is like where we're at. I think I had no, but we're around there. And the thing about this one that it was difficult in the beginning, and I'll tell you, is the stakes of this story are, they're not super low, but like they're not as high as in like Forever Your Rogue, okay? And I explain that as this. In Forever Your Rogue, the stakes are literally Cora could lose her children to her in-laws, who only want her son to control his fortune, okay? That is the stakes in that. And so Nate, when he's being a little bit flippant about all of this and whatever, we're like, dude, you got to get on this, because this is serious, right? And when he realizes the full weight of what he's doing, it scares him a little, but it also makes him want to live up to it, right? You know, one of my favorite quotes in that is that I will be what you need. I will live up to it. Have high expectations, because I will meet them, right? Oh, I made myself cry. That's what Nate was, right? And in this one, also love Ethan and Belle. That is who we're dealing with. Ethan is actually an American who found out that he had an uncle who left him his like printing business, only to get there and discover that he's, I think it's 100 pounds in debt, which, you know, doesn't sound a ton to us, but Ethan doesn't have that. And if he's not able to pay it off within 10 weeks, he's going to lose it. He gave up a pretty good job in America to come here and get this and to find out that he's in debt, right? And in a different vein of it, we have Belle, who she wants to be an author. She has been writing, and she actually ended a engagement 4 years ago because he was not supportive of her dream. He very much wanted to marry her just for his connection to her father. Her father at this point now is a judge, and she was engaged to like a constable or something who wanted the connections, whatever. And she broke that off. And so she's definitely now considered a spinster because, you know, it's not likely to do that, but she wants to write her stories and she doesn't know how to make this happen. So her and Ethan end up having a chance meeting. We won't go into all of it. And he ends up proposing to her that he needs to make some quick money. And through some different things they see, they settle on writing these things called penny bloods. Okay, the penny bloods, which are basically like, you know, short little like comics or stories or periodicals or whatever. And they're going to print it on cheap paper and they're going to sell it for a really, really low amount because he wants to be printing the news, but where they're living at that time, there's a very high tax on the news. So it wouldn't be something that could make them money fast enough in this 10 weeks. That's something they can look forward to later. He's like, we'll get there, but right now they need to make fast money. And so if they print these fictional stories on cheap paper and get people hooked on this story, they could hopefully make that money in 10 weeks. So that's the scheme, that's the plan. And the stakes are, you know, Ethan might lose this print shop that he never had anyway, and have to go back to the US to work, or I mean, the States, whatever we are. It was the US at this point. And she would continue to be like a spinster as she always was and hasn't finished a novel that she wants to share at all. So as I'm saying, it's not that the stakes aren't important, because the stakes are the stakes for your people. There's a saying out there that like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. There's just different levels of it for different people. So I'm not trying to like diminish what's happening for these characters, because again, I loved them. I really did. But at the start of this, it just felt kind of low stakes as we were getting going. And I was a little bit like bored with the first couple of weeks of us getting it going. And there was just a lot of the business side of it we had to go through, which I can very much tell that was Erin Langston did her research for it, you know, and a historical romance author wants to show off a little bit all the work that they did. And absolutely you should. But when I read Forever Your Rogue, I was hooked at the end of each chapter. I read that book all in one sitting. I couldn't put it down. I cried so many times and I just couldn't look away. And this was just enjoyable. I don't have big critiques besides what I just said, that the stakes weren't that high. So that's why, like, this is a 5-star read for me. I will read it again. I'd listen to the audiobook when it comes out. I'm going to get a copy for my shelves. But it's not the same as Forever Your Rogue. It's just not. But it still has a lot of those tender moments that you want, right? Really beautiful things while they're falling in love. And not to get in completely to the stories, but they both want, like, when they're getting to the love part, they both want the dream of the other to have their dream so badly, right? That, you know, it's that kind of story of the, like, the watch and the comb. There's that like it's not a parable, but thing of like the woman cut her hair to buy her husband a chain for his watch. He sold his watch to buy her a comb for her hair. Like, they're that kind of couple for what they want to sacrifice for the other. And that's really beautiful. So there are some really painful moments of these two. And I also liked that money couldn't solve everything in this one. This definitely is a working man. And though her family is well off, you know, she is the niece of well, she's a cousin of, like, is he going to be the Duke or the Viscount? I don't even know, but her family's pretty well off, but her stakes are more social. Like, her stakes are social. It's like, does she do this thing she wants to do and completely risk her reputation, which is already kind of ruined? So you can see what I mean. The stakes are what they are. And I've said stakes enough times. We'll move on. This was a 5-star read for me. This was I think a 2.5 or a 3. It was a 3 on the spice scale. Yes, still had some good steamy scenes, you know, and they were just wonderful. This was heartwarming and it was lovely. So I don't have big critiques. It just wasn't quite at a 5-star status for me. So that's where we sit. But anyway, I've done quite enough rambling about it, but those are my 5 favorite books that I read in September. It was a doozy. I still have 8 hours to read another book or two, which would go into October's, but for the readathon, I need to finish up a couple things. But yeah, 41 books. They were all, like, you can tell, pretty much everything I read was over 3.5 stars, which is always a good thing to see. So thank you so much for watching. You guys are amazing. Please make sure you like this, comment, give me a pumpkin emoji down below. It helps with the algorithm. And if you're interested in supporting what I do here, you can check out channel memberships or my Patreon. I am completely fan funded, so every little bit helps. It absolutely does. And have a wonderful fall, y'all. Bye.